Ever wondered what happens when talent collides with prejudice in the hallowed halls of elite music? Marcus Johnson knew all too well as whispers followed him through Westbrook Academy. Did you see his violin? It looks like something from a pawn shop. With a back injury that prevented him from sitting and a battered violin that drew contempt, Marcus faced impossible odds. But when the Academy's star student's expensive instrument vanished, all eyes turned to the scholarship student with the worn clothes. What happens when the only way to prove your worth is to stand tall in the face of those determined to see you fall? The ending of this story will leave you speechless. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The sleek glass doors of Westbrook Academy of Music gleamed in the autumn sunlight as Marcus Johnson stood before them, clutching his weathered violin case. His faded jeans and threadbare sweater stood in stark contrast to the polished marble entrance and the stream of students arriving in luxury vehicles, dressed in designer clothes. "You must be lost," sneered a tall boy with perfectly styled hair, looking Marcus up and down. "The community center is downtown." Marcus swallowed hard but kept his chin up. "I'm Marcus Johnson. I'm here on scholarship." A ripple of whispers and poorly concealed laughter spread among the gathering students. Marcus had expected this reaction. Westbrook was the most prestigious music academy in the country, a breeding ground for prodigies from wealthy families. Inside the grand foyer, Mrs. Whitmore, the academy director, approached with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze lingered disapprovingly on Marcus's scuffed shoes. "Mr. Johnson, I presume your arrival was anticipated." She handed him a stack of papers. "Your scholarship covers tuition only. Any additional expenses, proper attire, equipment upgrades, are your responsibility." As she led him through marble hallways adorned with portraits of famous alumni, Marcus felt the weight of every stare. When they reached the dormitory wing, she paused. "Westbrook has certain standards, Mr. Johnson. We've made an exception in your case due to your technical scores, but remember, talent alone isn't enough here." Left alone in his room, Marcus carefully opened his violin case. The instrument inside had seen better days. The wood was scratched, the finish worn away in patches where his fingers had pressed for years. But when he gently plucked the strings, the sound resonated with a warmth that belied its appearance. From the hallway, he heard voices. "Did you see his violin? It looks like something from a pawn shop. How did someone like him even get in here? Diversity scholarship, obviously. Bet he can barely play." Marcus closed his eyes and let his fingers move across the strings in a silent practice, the way his mother had taught him when they couldn't afford to make noise in their thin-walled apartment. Tomorrow would be his first class, his chance to show everyone what really mattered, not the clothes, not the case, but the music within. As night fell over the academy, Marcus stood by the window, watching students gather in groups, laughing and sharing summer stories. He remained alone, his back aching from the long journey, forcing him to shift his weight constantly. He wondered if coming here had been a mistake, but then remembered his mother's words. "Music doesn't care where you come from, Marcus. It only cares where you're going." The next morning, Marcus arrived early to Ms. Reynolds' advanced violin technique class. The practice room was empty except for perfectly arranged chairs and music stands. He chose a spot near the back, setting up his sheet music while carefully avoiding sitting down. Students began filtering in, their conversations dropping to whispers when they noticed him. A girl with long dark hair and gentle eyes took the spot next to him. "I'm Sophia Chen," she said with a genuine smile. "You're Marcus, right? I heard you got the highest score on the entrance audition." Before Marcus could respond, a tall, blond boy approached, flanked by two others. "You're in my spot," he said coldly. "I didn't realize seats were assigned," Marcus replied. The boy laughed, a sharp sound. "Everything is assigned here, scholarship. I'm Blake Thompson. My family has donated the East Wing practice rooms. This has been my spot for 3 years." Marcus gathered his things quickly, wincing as he straightened his back. Finding another spot, he remained standing, arranging his music carefully on the stand. Ms. Reynolds entered precisely at 9 o'clock, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. She was tall and thin, with gray-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun. Her gaze swept the room, pausing when she reached Marcus. "You. New student. Why aren't you seated?" All eyes turned to Marcus. "I prefer to stand while playing, ma'am." Her eyebrows rose. "At Westbrook, we follow proper posture protocols. Sit down immediately." Marcus hesitated. "I have a medical, sit down." Her voice cut like ice. Slowly, Marcus lowered himself into the chair, unable to hide his grimace as pain shot through his lower back. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to find a position that didn't send spikes of agony up his spine. Ms. Reynolds approached, eyeing his violin with undisguised disdain. "You expect to play at Westbrook level with this instrument?" She picked it up without permission, turning it over in her hands. "The bridge is barely functional. The fingerboard needs reshaping. And these strings, they're practically antiques." Laughter rippled through the room. Blake smirked openly. "I make do with what I have, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. "Making do isn't good enough here. Open your books to Paganini's Caprice No. 24. When Marcus's turn came to play, he forced himself to remain seated despite the pain. His fingers moved across the strings with practiced precision, coaxing a warm, rich tone from his battered instrument. The melody soared, complex and emotional, filling the room with sound that belied the violin's appearance. When he finished, the room was silent. Ms. Reynolds' expression was unreadable. "Technically adequate," she said finally. "But lacking refinement. You'll need to improve significantly to keep pace here." As class ended, Marcus stood quickly, relieving the pressure on his back. Blake bumped into him deliberately on the way out. "Nice playing, scholarship. For a community center recital, maybe." Sophia lingered behind. "Your playing was beautiful," she whispered. "Don't let them get to you." Marcus nodded gratefully, but as he watched the other students leave with their expensive instruments and confident strides, he wondered how much talent alone could overcome in a world where appearance seemed to matter more than substance. That night, as Marcus lay on the hard dormitory floor, the only position that somewhat relieved his back pain, memories flooded back, sharp and vivid. 2 years ago, Southside High School's music room. Ms. Bennett, the music teacher, towering over him, face contorted with rage. "Sit properly, Johnson. This isn't some jazz club." "Ma'am, I was just trying to reach the high notes better." The classroom had fallen silent as Ms. Bennett's voice rose. "In my classroom, you follow proper classical position. Feet flat, back straight, sitting centered." When Marcus had tried to explain his preference for standing while playing, she'd interpreted it as defiance. That day after class, she'd made him stay behind for proper posture training. "You'll sit here until you learn," she declared, forcing him down onto a hard wooden chair in the empty classroom. When he tried to stand after an hour, she'd pushed him back down with surprising strength. The edge of the chair had caught him just wrong, striking a vulnerable spot near his spine. The pain had been immediate and blinding. His mother, Loretta Johnson, had taken him to the free clinic the next day. Severe contusion to the lower vertebrae, the overworked doctor had said. "It'll heal eventually, but sitting for long periods will be painful for quite some time." They couldn't afford physical therapy. His mother's hospital custodian job barely covered rent and food. So Marcus had learned to adapt, to practice while standing, to find positions that minimized the pain. Ms. Bennett had been unmoved by the doctor's note. Convenient excuse for not following rules, she'd sniffed. In their small apartment, his mother had held ice packs to his back after long school days. "You have a gift, Marcus," she'd whispered. "Don't let anyone take that from you." She'd taught him violin herself, having once played in a community orchestra before life's hardships forced her to set aside her own musical dreams. Their apartment walls were thin, so they'd practiced with muted strings at night, his mother guiding his fingers by touch more than sound. The violin had been hers, a once beautiful instrument that had traveled with her from her childhood home. Over the years, it had weathered along with them, developing cracks that they carefully glued, strings they replaced only when absolutely necessary. When the Westbrook scholarship opportunity had appeared, she'd insisted he apply. "This is your chance, baby," she'd said, her eyes bright with hope. "Show them what music really means." Marcus had practiced for months, ignoring the pain, perfecting every note of his audition pieces. When the acceptance letter arrived, his mother had cried, holding him tight. "You remember what your grandfather used to say?" she'd asked. Marcus nodded. "Music is the great equalizer. In the dark, no one knows if you're playing on a Stradivarius or a cigar box." Now, lying on the cold floor of his dormitory room, Marcus thought about calling her. But he knew what she'd say, that he belonged here, that he had to persevere, that talent would eventually speak louder than prejudice. He carefully rolled onto his side, reaching for his violin. In the darkness, he placed his fingers on the strings, moving through the motions of tomorrow's assigned piece without making a sound. Outside his window, the moon illuminated the perfectly manicured Westbrook grounds. In 12 hours, he would face Ms. Reynolds' class again, along with the stares, the whispers, the judgment. The pain in his back was constant, a reminder of those who tried to force him to conform. But when he played, when he truly played, the pain receded, and only the music remained. As days turned into weeks at Westbrook, Marcus developed a routine. He arrived to classes early to secure a spot where he could stand without drawing attention. He practiced late at night in the furthest practice room, where fewer students would witness his unorthodox methods, playing standing, sometimes pacing, occasionally even lying down to ease his back when pain flared. During one late session, Marcus was lost in Vivaldi's Winter when a shadow appeared in the doorway. "Your bowing arm drops on the Allegro passage," Dr. Williams observed, stepping into the room. As the only black faculty member at Westbrook and head of the string department, he was both respected and somewhat isolated, much like Marcus himself. "I've been working on it, sir," Marcus replied, lowering his violin. Dr. Williams nodded toward the empty chair. "Most violinists sit." "I have a back condition." "I noticed. Yet you don't request accommodation." Marcus looked away. "Drawing more attention isn't helpful here. Neither is playing through pain." Dr. Williams approached, studying Marcus's violin with professional interest rather than the usual disdain. "This instrument has character. It was my mother's. A violin carries its history in its sound." He handed it back respectfully. "Tomorrow's chamber ensemble assignment, were you paired with anyone?" "No, sir. Ms. Reynolds said my irregular posture would disrupt group harmony." Dr. Williams's expression remained neutral, but his eyes flashed. "I see. Carry on, Mr. Johnson." The following day, Ms. Reynolds inspected each student's instrument before class. When she reached Marcus, her lips thinned. "Still using this device, Mr. Johnson? Surely by now you could have arranged an upgrade." Before Marcus could respond, Blake interjected, "Some people just don't belong in certain environments, Ms. Reynolds." Her smile was cold. "Indeed, Mr. Thompson. Quality seeks its own level." Later, during orchestra rehearsal, conductor Brandt stopped the entire ensemble, pointing his baton directly at Marcus. "Second violin, third stand. You're disrupting the section by standing." "I have a medical reason. If you can't conform to orchestra protocol, perhaps you shouldn't participate." From the first violin section, Blake's smirk was unmistakable. That evening, Marcus found his assigned practice room occupied. Blake and his friends had accidentally double-booked it. The next room had a mysterious, out-of-order sign. The pattern continued all week. In theory class, his compositions received harsh critiques despite following all technical requirements. Technically correct but lacking refinement became the standard feedback, always accompanied by meaningful glances at his worn clothes or battered instrument case. Dr. Williams occasionally appeared during Marcus's late practice sessions, offering quiet suggestions that dramatically improved his playing. He never mentioned Marcus's standing position again, instead adapting his teaching to accommodate it. Music finds its way through any obstacle, Dr. Williams said one night, including the obstacles others place in your path. On Friday, Ms. Reynolds announced a special performance opportunity. Selected students would play for the Board of Directors' quarterly meeting. Blake Thompson, Sophia Chen, and... She scanned the room, bypassing Marcus completely, James Werner. After class, Marcus overheard Blake in the hallway. "Did you see Scholarship Boy's face? As if someone like him could represent Westbrook. He can barely afford strings, let alone proper concert attire." The laughter that followed burned in Marcus's ears as he slipped away, back straight despite the pain, violin case clutched tightly in his calloused hands. The academy buzzed with excitement over the upcoming fall showcase, where select students would perform for alumni and potential donors. Marcus neither expected nor received an invitation to participate, instead focusing on mastering Paganini's notoriously difficult Caprice No. 24 during his midnight practice sessions. On Monday morning, chaos erupted in the East Wing practice rooms. Blake's custom-made Bergonzi violin, worth more than some houses, had vanished from its velvet-lined case. Mrs. Whitmore called an emergency assembly, her voice tight with controlled fury. "This theft is unprecedented in Westbrook's history. The instrument will be returned immediately, or severe consequences will follow." Marcus sat in the back of the auditorium, shifting uncomfortably from the hard seats. When the assembly ended, he found himself surrounded by Blake and 3 other students. "Empty your locker. Now." Blake's face was flushed with anger. "What? Why would I?" "You're the only one with motive," Blake hissed. "Your pathetic excuse for a violin is falling apart, and you're desperate to prove yourself." A crowd gathered as Blake forced Marcus toward the locker rooms, Ms. Reynolds and Mrs. Whitmore following closely behind. Marcus's protests fell on deaf ears as Blake dramatically threw open Marcus's locker. "Nothing. Check his dorm," someone shouted. The procession moved to the dormitories, Marcus's face burning with humiliation. Mrs. Whitmore used her master key to open his room, where Blake immediately began rummaging through Marcus's belongings. "Careful with that," Marcus exclaimed as Blake carelessly knocked aside his sheet music and the framed photo of his mother. Blake pulled open the wardrobe, rifled through drawers, looked under the bed. "Nothing. It has to be here," Blake insisted, growing more agitated. "He's hidden it somewhere." "Mr. Thompson," Mrs. Whitmore began, "it appears." "Wait," Ms. Reynolds interrupted, pointing to Marcus's violin case. "We haven't checked there." Marcus's heart pounded as he handed over his case. "This is ridiculous. I would never." Ms. Reynolds opened it to reveal only Marcus's old violin nestled in worn velvet. "The thief wouldn't hide it with his own instrument," Blake scoffed. "He's stashed it somewhere else." Though no evidence was found, the suspicion lingered. As they left, Marcus overheard Ms. Reynolds whisper to Mrs. Whitmore, "Scholarship students often feel entitled to what others have earned. Perhaps we should reconsider our diversity initiatives." That afternoon, someone had scrawled "thief" across Marcus's locker. In theory class, no one would sit near him. Even Sophia kept her distance, though he caught her sympathetic glance. After dinner, Marcus retreated to the practice rooms, only to find a note on the door, reserved for paying students only. Defeated, he returned to his room, where pain and humiliation kept him awake late into the night. He thought about calling his mother but couldn't bear to worry her. Instead, he silently fingered melodies on his violin, the strings muted by a practice damper. Outside his window, the autumn moon illuminated the campus where wealth and privilege determined worth more than talent or character. For the first time since arriving, Marcus wondered if some battles couldn't be won, no matter how beautiful the music. The following week unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare for Marcus. Students moved aside when he walked down hallways, conversations halting mid-sentence. In the cafeteria, tables filled impossibly quickly whenever he approached with his tray. Even instructors seemed to have made up their minds, his assignments received cursory attention, his questions went unacknowledged. Blake's violin remained missing, and with each passing day, the unspoken accusation against Marcus solidified into assumed fact. "The board is considering an investigation," Sophia whispered to him during theory class, the only student still willing to acknowledge his existence. "Blake's father is threatening to withdraw funding if they don't find the culprit." "I didn't take it," Marcus said for what felt like the 100th time. "I know," she replied, glancing around nervously. "But they need someone to blame, and the scholarship kid is the easy target," he finished bitterly. That evening, Marcus found all the practice rooms reserved yet again. Frustrated, he wandered toward the oldest building on campus, where the unused rehearsal spaces had been largely forgotten since the new Performing Arts Center opened. The janitor, Mr. Jenkins, was mopping the hallway. Unlike everyone else, he nodded respectfully at Marcus. "Looking for somewhere quiet, son?" "Somewhere to practice," Marcus explained. "But everywhere's booked." Mr. Jenkins studied him for a moment. "Room 103 has an old upright piano that's seen better days, but the acoustics are decent. Nobody uses it anymore." "Thank you, sir." Marcus hesitated. "You don't think I stole Blake's violin, do you?" The older man leaned on his mop. "Been here 30 years. Seen plenty of instruments go missing, usually turn up when someone remembers they left them at a party or in their girlfriend's car." He shrugged. "Convenient timing though, right after you showed everybody up in that masterclass." "I didn't show anyone up, maybe not intentionally. But talent has a way of making itself known, even on a broken-down fiddle." He winked and continued mopping. "Rooms unlocked. Stay as long as you need." The forgotten practice room became Marcus's sanctuary. Each night, he practiced until his fingers ached and his back throbbed, pushing through Paganini's devilish techniques, mastering Bach's complex counterpoint. Music became both escape and armor against the isolation. After midnight, when most students were asleep, Marcus would sometimes venture to the main building's empty bathroom, using the large mirrors to check his form and positioning. On one such night, he was startled by Dr. Williams's reflection appearing behind him. "Your perseverance is remarkable, Mr. Johnson." Marcus lowered his violin. "I don't have much choice, sir." "There's always a choice." Dr. Williams leaned against the wall. "You could leave. Many would in your position. That would prove them right." "About what?" "That people like me don't belong in places like this." Dr. Williams nodded slowly. "I understand better than you might think." He straightened his tie, the same one he wore every day, Marcus suddenly realized. "When I was at Curtis Institute, I was the only black student in my year. My roommate requested a transfer after one night." "What did you do?" "I practiced." "Excellence doesn't guarantee acceptance, Mr. Johnson, but it demands respect." As Dr. Williams turned to leave, he added casually, "The Winter Showcase auditions are next week. Required repertoire is Bach's Chaconne." "I wasn't planning to audition." "Perhaps you should reconsider. Bach didn't write that piece to be played sitting down anyway." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "It was composed for movement, for reaching toward heaven despite the weight holding you down." Alone again, Marcus raised his violin. The Chaconne was famously difficult, a piece that many professionals approached with trepidation. But as his bow touched the strings, something shifted inside him. The notes began to flow, his body swaying slightly to accommodate his injured back, finding new ways to create beauty despite restriction. In that moment, standing alone in an empty bathroom at midnight, Marcus reclaimed what had been stolen from him, not a physical instrument, but the joy of creation, the power of music to transcend circumstance. Hours later, returning to his room as dawn broke, Marcus made his decision. He would audition for the showcase. Even if no one believed in his innocence, they would be forced to acknowledge his talent. The ancient maple tree outside room 103 cast dappled shadows across Marcus as he practiced the Chaconne. His back burned with constant pain, but he'd discovered that if he shifted his weight just so, letting the music guide his movements rather than fighting against his body's limitations, he could play for hours. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Mr. Jenkins had paused his evening rounds, listening outside the door. The old janitor's weathered face softened as the melancholy notes filled the hallway. When the music stopped briefly, he continued on, purposely making his cart rattle. Inside, Marcus heard the noise and quickly muted his strings. He'd been discovered too many times by students eager to report his unauthorized use of practice spaces. A folded piece of paper slid under the door. Cautiously, Marcus retrieved it. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper article dated 1978, Eastman graduate Jenkins Williams performs with Chicago Symphony. The grainy photo showed a much younger Mr. Jenkins holding a violin, beaming beside a renowned conductor. The next evening, Marcus found a thermos of hot tea and a small bottle of arnica gel, a natural pain reliever, outside room 103. No note, but he knew who had left them. After practice, Marcus sought out Mr. Jenkins. "You were a professional violinist," Marcus said, finding him organizing the supply closet. The older man smiled wryly. "A lifetime ago. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered?" Jenkins rubbed his left hand, the slightly crooked fingers telling their own story of injury. "Car accident in '82. Couldn't play professionally after that. But music finds a way to stay with you. You could have taught. Applied to 27 music schools." His smile turned sad. None seemed to think a black man with a damaged hand had much to offer young musicians. Marcus nodded, understanding all too clearly. "Your playing, though," Jenkins continued, "reminds me of something important. Music isn't just in the hands. It's in the soul." He pointed to Marcus's violin case. "Is that your composition book sticking out?" Marcus pulled out the worn notebook, filled with his handwritten scores. "Just some ideas." Jenkins flipped through the pages, his eyebrows rising progressively higher. "These aren't just some ideas. This is sophisticated writing. The counterpoint here." He pointed to a particularly complex passage, "That's graduate-level composition. My mother taught me the basics. The rest I figured out by ear. Dr. Williams needs to see these." Marcus shook his head. "I'm already enough of an outsider. Trust me on this." Jenkins handed back the notebook. "Sometimes the right person recognizing your gift changes everything." The following morning, Marcus found Dr. Williams waiting outside his theory class. "Mr. Johnson, a word please." They walked to Dr. Williams' office, where the professor closed the door and pulled out a familiar notebook, Marcus's composition book. "Mr. Jenkins suggested I review these. Hope you don't mind. You went through my personal." He was right to insist. Dr. Williams opened to a symphonic sketch Marcus had begun the previous month. "This is extraordinary work. Untrained, yes, but with an intuitive understanding of orchestration that can't be taught. It's just something I do for myself. No. It's something the world needs to hear." Dr. Williams leaned forward. "The Winter Showcase has a composition segment. I'm entering your work. Without my permission?" "With my strong encouragement." Dr. Williams' expression softened. "Marcus, I recognize what's happening here. The isolation. The accusations. The convenient targeting of the student who threatens the established order. I'm not trying to threaten anything. I just want to play music. Sometimes excellence itself is the threat." He tapped the notebook. "Your compositions reveal something they fear most, that true talent needs no pedigree, no fancy instrument, no connections. Just the courage to express what's inside." For the first time since arriving at Westbrook, Marcus felt seen, not as the scholarship student, not as an outsider, but as a musician worthy of respect. "The showcase is in 3 weeks, Dr. Williams continued. I'd like you to orchestrate this piece for string quintet. And," he held up a hand to forestall Marcus's objection, "you'll be conducting it yourself." "But my back." Will require you to conduct standing, as most conductors do anyway. Dr. Williams smiled. Sometimes our greatest challenges become our signature strengths, Mr. Johnson. As Marcus left the office, clutching his composition book, a new possibility unfurled before him, not just survival at Westbrook, but transformation of what Westbrook itself could be. The Winter Showcase Selection Committee convened in the oak-paneled boardroom, 11 faculty members seated around a massive table with Mrs. Whitmore at its head. The annual event was Westbrook's most prestigious, attended by alumni, donors, and representatives from major conservatories and orchestras worldwide. Next application, Mrs. Whitmore announced, Blake Thompson. Paganini's Concerto No. 1, First Movement. Impeccable technique, Ms. Reynolds noted. And his new Guarneri will showcase Westbrook's standard of excellence. Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. New Guarneri? What happened to the Bergonzi? Blake's father replaced it, Ms. Reynolds replied smoothly. The missing instrument has been written off as, unfortunate shrinkage. How convenient, Dr. Williams murmured. The committee proceeded through applications until reaching the final slot. I'm submitting Marcus Johnson for the composition segment, Dr. Williams announced, distributing photocopies of Marcus's orchestral sketch. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat. Mr. Johnson is still under a cloud of suspicion regarding Mr. Thompson's missing violin. A cloud that has conveniently lingered despite zero evidence, Dr. Williams countered. Furthermore, Mrs. Whitmore continued as if he hadn't spoken, the composition segment traditionally features works by our advanced theory students, not first years. Traditional doesn't always mean correct. Dr. Williams tapped the score. I invite anyone to find a more sophisticated first-year composition in Westbrook's history. The theory professor, Dr. Liu, examined the music carefully. The harmonic structure is unusually mature. And this counterpoint. She looked up, impressed despite herself. Did he study somewhere before Westbrook? Self-taught, Dr. Williams replied. With assistance from his mother. Disbelieving murmurs circulated around the table. Ms. Reynolds scoffed. Surely someone helped him. These techniques are too advanced. Judge the work, not your assumptions about the composer, Dr. Williams challenged. Isn't that what we claim to teach here? The debate continued until Mrs. Whitmore finally raised her hand for silence. We'll include the piece, she conceded reluctantly, but not as a featured work. Mr. Johnson may present his composition during the pre-concert reception. In the foyer. Dr. Williams leaned forward. The foyer has terrible acoustics. It's the pre-concert or nothing, William. Her use of his first name without the title was deliberate. And only if he submits the final orchestration by next Friday. After the meeting, Dr. Williams found Marcus in room 103, working through a particularly challenging passage in the chaconne. Your composition has been accepted, he announced without preamble. Marcus lowered his violin, surprised. For the actual showcase. For the pre-concert reception. Dr. Williams didn't sugarcoat the politics. It's not ideal, but it's a foot in the door. And sometimes that's all you need. That evening, Marcus called his mother from the payphone in the dormitory hallway. They're going to play my music, Mom, he said, voice tight with emotion. At the Winter Showcase. Loretta Johnson's voice crackled with pride and poor connection. I knew they'd see your gift eventually, baby. It's just in the foyer, before the main concert. Not the real stage. Any stage you stand on becomes the real stage, she replied firmly. Your grandfather used to say music finds its rightful audience, no matter where it's played. After a pause, Marcus asked, could you come? I know it's expensive, but, wild horses couldn't keep me away. Her voice wavered. I'll pick up an extra shift. Don't you worry about the money. Later that night, Dr. Williams made another call from his office. Maestro Russo. William Williams from Westbrook. About the Winter Showcase, there's a young composer you need to hear. Giovanni Russo, conductor of the National Symphony and one of the most influential figures in classical music, was not easily impressed. But his long friendship with Dr. Williams earned the request serious consideration. "Send me the score," Rousseau requested. "If it's as remarkable as you claim, I'll adjust my schedule." Meanwhile, Mrs. Whitmore made her own call to Blake's father, Gregory Thompson. "Everything's arranged," she assured him. "Your son will open the showcase, and the Johnson boys' piece will be safely contained in the pre-concert reception. Most patrons will miss it entirely." "Excellent," Thompson replied. "And the scholarship review?" "Pending further evaluation of his suitability for Westbrook's culture." As these conversations unfolded across phone lines, Marcus worked late into the night on his orchestration, unaware of the forces aligning both for and against him. His back ached from hours of standing, but the music flowing from his pen made the pain worthwhile. In his mind, he could already hear how the quintet would sound, voices intertwining, reaching towards something greater than any single instrument could express. When dawn broke, he finally slept, the completed first movement on his desk and a peaceful smile on his face for the first time in months. With 2 weeks until the winter showcase, Marcus divided his time between perfecting his composition and practicing Bach's Chaconne. Although his piece had been relegated to the pre-concert reception, he was determined it would be flawless. Each evening, he worked in room 103 orchestrating his symphony for string quintet as Dr. Williams had suggested. "The main theme needs more prominence in the cello line," Dr. Williams advised during one of their sessions. "Let it breathe before the violins respond." Marcus made the adjustment, his pencil moving confidently across the staff paper. "Like this?" "Exactly." Dr. Williams watched him work with quiet approval. "You have an intuitive understanding of instrumental voice." "My mother used to describe orchestra instruments as characters in a story," Marcus explained. "The violin was the protagonist, the cello the wise mentor, the viola the complicated friend." "A good analogy," Dr. Williams smiled. Speaking of violins, he opened his case and removed an instrument that made Marcus's breath catch. The violin was clearly vintage, its deep amber varnish glowing with the patina that only centuries could create. The carved scroll ended in a delicate volute that spoke of master craftsmanship. "This is a Jean-Baptiste Violin, circa 1850, Dr. Williams said. "My teacher left it to me when he passed." He held it out to Marcus, who took it reverently. "I couldn't possibly." "You can and will," Dr. Williams interrupted firmly. "For practice only. Keep using your own instrument publicly for now, we don't need to add fuel to any fires. But you should know what it feels like to play on an instrument that doesn't fight you." The first notes Marcus drew from the violon nearly brought tears to his eyes. The tone was rich and responsive, requiring half the pressure of his own violin. For the first time, he could play without the extra strain that exacerbated his back pain. Across campus, in the student lounge, Sophia overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Did you see Blake's new Guarneri?" a first-year violinist asked. "Yeah, his dad bought it right after the Bergonzi disappeared," another replied. "Convenient timing." Blake glanced up from his textbook. "What's that supposed to mean?" The student backpedaled quickly. "Nothing, man. Just saying you lucked out." After the others left, Sophia lingered, pretending to study while Blake texted on his phone. When he stepped away to get coffee, she noticed his violin case partially open on the table. Something compelled her to look inside. Tucked into a side pocket was a brass key with a tag marked Storage B12. The basement storage rooms, where no one went except maintenance staff. When Blake returned, Sophia was engrossed in her book, her heart pounding. That night, she waited until after curfew, then slipped downstairs to the basement level. The storage corridor was dimly lit and smelled of dust. Room B12 was at the far end. The key turned easily in the lock. Inside, behind stacks of old music stands, a familiar velvet case sat on a shelf. Sophia opened it just enough to confirm her suspicion. Blake's missing Bergonzi nestled inside, perfectly intact. She closed the case, relocked the door, and hurried back upstairs, nearly colliding with Blake himself as she rounded the corner to the dormitory wing. "What are you doing up so late?" he demanded. "Getting water," she lied, raising the bottle she'd brought as cover. His eyes narrowed. "From the basement? I got lost. Still learning my way around." She forced a laugh. "Good night, Blake." The next morning, she found Marcus in the library. "I know where Blake's violin is," she whispered. "He hid it himself, in basement storage." Marcus stared at her. "Why would he do that?" "To frame you, obviously. And it worked." She glanced around nervously. "We should tell Mrs. Whitmore. And she'll believe us over Blake Thompson, whose family donated the East Wing." Marcus shook his head. "We need proof. I have the storage room number." "We could." "No," Marcus interrupted. "Getting caught breaking into storage would just confirm everyone's suspicions about me." "So we do nothing?" Sophia looked frustrated. "For now, we focus on the music." Marcus showed her his composition. "This is how I answer them." That afternoon, Blake cornered Sophia after theory class. "Funny running into you last night," he said casually, but his eyes were cold. "Almost like you were snooping around." "I told you, I got lost." "Sure." He stepped closer. "Let me be clear, if you say anything about anything you think you might have seen, I'll make sure everyone knows you helped Johnson hide my violin. My father can have your scholarship revoked with one phone call." "You can't." "I can. And I will." He smiled thinly. "Just mind your own business, Sophia. Some people belong here, and some don't. Don't end up on the wrong side." As the showcase approached, rumors circulated that Maestro Giovanni Russo would attend, a rare honor that sent the faculty into a frenzy of preparation. Ms. Reynolds increased rehearsals for featured performers, particularly Blake, whose concerto would open the program. In room 103, Marcus practiced with renewed determination on Dr. Williams' Violin, his playing reaching new heights as the instrument responded to his every nuance. His orchestration was complete, the parts copied for the small chamber group that would perform it, graduate students Dr. Williams had personally selected. "Remember," Dr. Williams advised during their final session, "they will underestimate you. Let your music answer." The night before the showcase, Marcus returned the violin reluctantly. "Thank you," he said simply, unable to fully express what the loan had meant. Dr. Williams nodded in understanding. "Tomorrow, you'll play your own violin again, but you'll play it knowing what's possible." As Marcus left, Dr. Williams made one final call. "Everything's arranged, Maestro. You'll be there for the pre-concert reception?" "Wouldn't miss it," Russo replied. "Though I'm still mystified why this prodigy is playing in a foyer rather than opening the program." "Sometimes," Dr. Williams said quietly, "the most important notes are heard in unexpected places." Snow dusted the Westbrook campus on the morning of the winter showcase, transforming the Gothic buildings into a scene from a fairy tale. Inside, however, tension crackled like static electricity. Marcus woke early, his back aching worse than usual after a night of restless sleep. He carefully stretched, using the exercises he'd developed over time, and packed his violin and composition folder. Today would determine whether talent truly could transcend circumstance. In the practice rooms, chaos reigned as performers made last-minute adjustments. Blake Thompson held court in the largest space, surrounded by admirers as he ran through passages from his concerto on his gleaming new Guarneri. Marcus found a quiet corner in the library to review his score one final time. The quintet would rehearse briefly at noon, their only opportunity before the pre-concert reception at 6 o'clock. At noon sharp, the graduate students assembled in room 103. They were polite but reserved, clearly skeptical about a first-year's composition. "Let's begin with the opening movement," Marcus suggested, trying to sound confident. As they played, the musicians' expressions shifted from professional neutrality to genuine interest. By the third page, they were fully engaged, exchanging impressed glances at particularly inventive passages. The counterpoint here is remarkable, the first violinist commented during a pause. Where did you study composition? Mostly self-taught, Marcus admitted. The cellist raised her eyebrows. Seriously? This writing shows sophisticated understanding of string technique. Their validation meant more than Marcus could express. For the first time, he was being judged solely on his music, not his appearance, background, or damaged violin. After the rehearsal, Marcus returned to his room to change into his performance clothes, a simple black shirt and his only pair of dress pants, carefully pressed. He wished he had proper concert attire, but it would have to do. A knock at his door revealed Dr. Williams holding a garment bag. Concert attire, he explained. My nephew's, about your size. He didn't need it back. Inside was a perfectly tailored black suit. Marcus swallowed hard. Thank you, sir. Dr. Williams nodded. One more thing. He handed Marcus a small package. For your back. Medical-grade pain reliever patch. Won't make it disappear, but should take the edge off for a few hours. As Marcus prepared, the first guests began arriving, wealthy alumni, conservatory representatives, and distinguished musicians. Among them, unnoticed by most, was Loretta Johnson, who had taken 3 buses and a train to reach Westbrook. She wore her church dress and carried a small bouquet of flowers purchased from a street vendor. At the main entrance, she was directed to a side door marked, General Admission. Inside, she found herself in a service corridor rather than the grand foyer. A passing staff member gave her directions to the main hall, but as she turned to leave, she heard familiar music, Marcus's composition, being played in a final rehearsal. Following the sound, she found room 103 and stood outside, listening with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, a sleek black car delivered Maestro Russo to the main entrance, where Mrs. Whitmore waited to greet him. Maestro. We're honored by your presence. The featured performances begin at 7 o'clock. I'm here for the pre-concert reception, he interrupted. Williams tells me there's a composition I must hear. Mrs. Whitmore's smile faltered. Ah, the student work in the foyer. Merely an appetizer before the main program. Sometimes the appetizer outshines the entree, Russo replied mildly. At 5:30, Marcus met his quintet near the foyer. They would set up while guests arrived, then perform at 6:15, essentially as background music during cocktails. Not ideal, but Marcus was determined to make the most of it. As the graduates arranged their music stands, a commotion erupted from the main hall. Ms. Reynolds burst through the doors, face ashen. James is ill, severe food poisoning. He can't perform the Bach. The Bach chaconne was scheduled as a key piece in the main program, a challenging solo that few students could handle with minimal preparation. Dr. Williams, who had been adjusting the foyer's meager lighting to better illuminate the quintet, spoke up. Marcus can perform it. All eyes turned to him. Absolutely not, Ms. Reynolds snapped. We need a professional-level performance, not a test him, interrupted a commanding voice. Maestro Russo stepped forward, his presence immediately dominating the space. Have him play the opening. If it's insufficient, find someone else. Mrs. Whitmore looked trapped. Refusing would insult the maestro, agreeing could undermine the showcase's standards. Very well, she conceded reluctantly. Mr. Johnson, the opening of the chaconne, please. Marcus retrieved his violin, his own worn instrument, not the borrowed violon. As he raised it to his shoulder, standing tall despite the pain in his back, he caught sight of his mother slipping into the back of the gathering crowd, her eyes shining with pride. With a deep breath, he began to play. The chaconne's opening chords resonated throughout the foyer, rich and profound. Marcus played with complete conviction, his technique flawless but secondary to the emotional depth he conveyed. The difficult double stops that challenged even professional violinists flowed from his fingers as naturally as breathing. When he finished the opening section, the foyer was silent except for the echo of the final note. Maestro Russo turned to Mrs. Whitmore. I believe we found our soloist. Word spread quickly throughout Westbrook that the scholarship student would perform Bach's Chaconne in the main program. Blake Thompson paced backstage, furious that his concerto would no longer open the showcase. "This is absurd," he complained to Ms. Reynolds. "He's not even properly trained. And that violin, it's practically an insult to Bach." "Unfortunately, Maestro Russo's opinion carries weight," she replied tightly. "We had no choice." In the green room, Marcus applied another pain relief patch to his back. The first had helped, but standing through both his composition and the Chaconne would push his physical limits. Dr. Williams appeared with a glass of water and 2 pills. "Anti-inflammatories," he explained. "Strongest available over the counter." "Thank you." Marcus took them gratefully. "I saw my mother in the audience." Dr. Williams smiled. "I arranged a proper seat for her. Front row, center." The pre-concert reception began, the foyer filling with Westbrook's elite patrons in evening wear. Marcus's quintet was positioned near the grand staircase, acoustically poor but visually prominent. As the graduate students took their places, Marcus stepped forward to conduct. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Williams announced, quieting the crowd. "A composition premiere by Marcus Johnson, first-year student and recipient of the Westbrook Merit Scholarship." Marcus raised his arms, pushing aside awareness of the skeptical glances and whispered comments. The quintet began, and his music filled the space, complex, emotional, and undeniably masterful. As the piece progressed, conversation ceased. Wine glasses remained suspended mid-sip. By the final movement, Maestro Russo had moved to stand directly before the quintet, his expression intent. When the final note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence before applause erupted, genuine, enthusiastic applause, not the polite acknowledgement usually given to student works. Maestro Russo approached Marcus, shaking his hand warmly. "Extraordinary composition," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Modern yet accessible, complex yet emotionally direct. Where did you study?" "Here at Westbrook, sir. And with my mother before that." "Remarkable." Russo turned to address Mrs. Whitmore and the gathering crowd. "This young man represents the future of American composition. Westbrook is fortunate to have discovered such talent." Mrs. Whitmore's smile was brittle as she thanked the maestro. In the background, Blake and his father whispered urgently. As guests moved toward the main concert hall, Sophia rushed up to Marcus. "They found Blake's violin," she said breathlessly. "A janitor discovered it in an unused storage room." "Conveniently timed," Marcus remarked. "Mr. Jenkins is telling everyone he saw Blake hiding it there weeks ago." Sophia's eyes sparkled. "Apparently, he's known all along but waited for the perfect moment." On stage, the main program began. Marcus waited in the wings, focusing on his breathing, trying to manage his pain. The Bach Chaconne would follow a piano sonata, placing it near the middle of the program, the position of highest honor. When his moment came, Marcus walked center stage carrying his worn violin. The contrast between his instrument and the setting couldn't have been more stark, the magnificent concert hall with its crystal chandeliers and velvet curtains, and the battered violin that had been his mother's sole possession of value. From the first row, Loretta Johnson watched her son take position, standing tall despite everything he had endured. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, they shared a silent acknowledgement of their journey, the late-night practice sessions in their tiny apartment, the sacrifices made for sheet music and strings, the unwavering belief in his gift. Marcus began the Chaconne without introduction. The opening chords resonated throughout the hall with an authority that silenced even the skeptics. As he progressed through the piece's complex variations, his body moved with the music, his standing position no longer a limitation but a strength, allowing him the freedom to physically express Bach's architecture of sound. In the audience, Mrs. Whitmore's expression shifted from resigned tolerance to reluctant admiration. Ms. Reynolds sat stone-faced, her worldview visibly cracking as Marcus's performance defied every assumption she had made about him. Backstage, Blake watched on the monitor, his face pale. Beside him, his father made a phone call, speaking in urgent whispers. When Marcus reached the chacon's midpoint, the transcendent shift from D minor to D major that Bach designed as a moment of spiritual transformation, audible gasps came from the audience. His interpretation brought new light to a piece performed thousands of times over centuries, revealing nuances that even seasoned musicians in the audience had never fully appreciated. As the final variation returned to the profound minor key theme, Marcus poured everything into the music, his struggle, his pain, his determination, and ultimately, his triumph. The final chord hung in the air, resonating with perfect intonation despite his humble instrument. The silence that followed lasted just 3 heartbeats before the audience erupted. The standing ovation began with Maestro Russo and spread like wildfire. From her front row seat, Loretta Johnson stood with tears streaming down her face, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Marcus bowed, wincing slightly as his back protested, then straightened to face the audience that had once dismissed him but now clamored for his acknowledgement. In that moment, the broken violin and worn clothes no longer defined him, only his music did. The morning after the showcase, Marcus was summoned to Mrs. Whitmore's office. He arrived to find not only the director but also Dr. Williams, Maestro Russo, and surprisingly, Mr. Jenkins, no longer in his janitor's uniform but wearing a well-tailored suit. Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Whitmore began formally, in light of recent events, there are several matters to address. Maestro Russo spoke first. I'm offering you a summer apprenticeship with the National Symphony. Your composition deserves a full orchestral treatment, which we will premiere next season. Marcus struggled to process this extraordinary opportunity. Thank you, Maestro. I'm honored. Furthermore, Mrs. Whitmore continued with visible discomfort, regarding the matter of Mr. Thompson's violin, evidence has emerged indicating you were wrongfully accused. Blake has withdrawn from Westbrook, Dr. Williams added. His father's substantial donation to the new performance hall has been quietly rescinded as well. Mr. Jenkins, or rather, Dr. Jenkins, finally spoke. 30 years ago, I left performing due to injury, but never lost my connection to music. I've been observing Westbrook while working as maintenance staff, preparing for my new role. He smiled at Marcus's confusion. Starting next semester, I'll be heading the composition department, and I'd like you to be my teaching assistant. But I'm only a first year, Marcus protested. Sometimes talent transcends conventional timelines, Dr. Jenkins replied. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat. Additionally, the board has approved a full scholarship extension covering room, board, and a stipend for expenses, including, she gestured to a case on her desk, this. Inside the case lay a beautiful violin, not brand new but lovingly restored, with a warm amber finish. A Giuseppe Fiorini, circa 1920, Dr. Williams explained. From the Academy's collection. On permanent loan to you. And, Mrs. Whitmore continued, we've arranged for you to see the university's orthopedic specialist about your back. Proper treatment should have been offered immediately upon your arrival. Marcus felt overwhelmed. Thank you, but, no thanks necessary, Dr. Williams interrupted firmly. This isn't charity, Mr. Johnson. It's the Academy finally fulfilling its mission, recognizing and nurturing exceptional talent, regardless of background. As Marcus left the office, Sophia was waiting outside. I heard everything, she admitted. The whole school's talking about it. You're officially a legend. And Blake? Gone. His father tried to cover everything up, but too many people heard Dr. Jenkins' account. She smiled. Ms. Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave pending review of her teaching methods. Later that evening, Marcus sat with his mother in a small cafe near campus. She couldn't stay long, her bus left in an hour, but her pride filled the space between them. Your grandfather would have been so proud, she said, touching his hand. He always said music was the great equalizer. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. You did it yourself, baby. All I did was show you the door, you walked through it on your own. When they parted at the bus station, Marcus handed her a small envelope. Dr. Williams arranged it. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was a check, the first installment of his teaching assistant salary, enough to cover 3 months of their apartment rent. Back in his dormitory room, Marcus stood by the window, watching snow fall gently over the campus that had once seemed so hostile but now offered possibilities he'd never imagined. His back still ached, some injuries never fully heal, but he'd learned that limitations could become strengths, that broken things still contained beauty. He lifted the Fiorini violin to his shoulder, testing its voice. The sound was rich and warm, responsive to his lightest touch. But before beginning his evening practice, he carefully packed his mother's old violin in its case, securing it for safekeeping. Some things, no matter how worn or broken they might appear to others, remain our most precious possessions, not for their monetary value, but for the journey they represent. Like the music itself, their worth transcends appearance, revealing itself only to those who truly listen. As the first notes of a new composition filled his room, Marcus Johnson stood tall, his music finally speaking without impediment, his story just beginning. Dear friend, true talent cannot be defined by appearance, background, or circumstance. In a world quick to judge based on what we can see, we must learn to listen deeper, to the music beneath the surface, to the stories behind the struggles. Every person deserves to be evaluated on their gifts, not their limitations or circumstances. By sharing stories like Marcus's, we hope to inspire conversations about opportunity, prejudice, and the power of perseverance. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these meaningful stories to light, reminding us all that sometimes, the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places.